taxable general obligation, or did you want each of those broken out? That's the same one, is it? And, okay, I got you. And taxable general obligation refunding bond series 2022B of the city of Tonganoxie, Kansas, providing for the levy and collection of an annual tax for the purpose of paying the principal and interest on said bonds as they become due, authorizing certain other documents and actions in connection therewith, and making certain covenants with respect thereto.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Ms. Huntington, will you do a roll call vote, please?
Rocky Hempel,
Yes.
Jacob Dale,
Yes.
Chris Donnelly,
Yes.
Jennifer McCutcheon.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. Moving on to item C, Resolution 02-2201, prescribing the form and details and authorizing and directing the sale of delivery of general obligation bonds, Series 2022A. Is there any discussion on that? If not, I would be looking for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve Resolution 02-22-01, prescribing the form and details of and authorizing and directing the sale and delivery of general obligation bonds Series 2022A and taxable general obligation refunding bonds Series 2022B of the city of Tonganoxie, Kansas, previously authorized by ordinance number 1501 of the issuer, making certain covenants and agreements to provide for the payment and security thereof, and authorizing certain other documents and actions connected therewith.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Ms. Huntington, will you call a roll vote, please?
Rocky Hempel,
Yes.
Jacob Dale,
Yes.
Chris Donnelly,
Yes.
Jennifer McCutcheon.
Thank you. It passes unanimously. Moving on to D, Resolution 02-2202, authorizing and directing the issuance, sale, and delivery of general obligation temporary notes, Series 2022C. Any conversation about that item? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Dale?
I'm going to go for the trifecta. I
Okay.
make a motion that we approve Resolution 02-22-02, authorizing and directing the issuance, sale, and delivery of general obligation temporary notes, Series 2022C of the city of Tonganoxie, Kansas, providing for the levy and collection of an annual tax if necessary for the purpose of paying the principal and interest on said notes as they become due, making certain covenants and agreements to provide for the payment and security thereof, and authorizing certain other documents and actions connected therewith.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Ms. Huntington, will you call a roll call vote, please?
Rocky Hempel,
Yes.
Jacob Dale,
Yes.
Chris Donnelly,
Yes.
Jennifer McCutcheon.
All right, passes unanimously. Mr. Hart, thank you so much. Sorry, put my glasses on. Thank you so much for all the work that you did on this. I appreciate it. Anything more for this before we move on? All right, thank you. Moving on to item E, Resolution 02-2203, authorizing acceptance of Kansas Gas Grant of Utility Easement. Ms. Kirstelik may have this.
I can do a quick intro on
Okay.
that too, Mayor. So as you probably recall, we talked about this a few months back. Kansas Gas needs to upgrade their service line that comes into the business park. This is part of some of the private utility upgrades needed at the business park for Hills. Their original submittal was reviewed by the city attorney. She submitted some changes. Primarily, one of our issues was they submitted a right-of-way document, and we were more comfortable with very specific utility easement language. They accepted all of Ms. Kirstelik's changes, and that's the form that's presented in the packet tonight for your consideration.
All right, thank you. Is there anything to add to that from council?
Not unless anybody has any questions.
Okay. Council, any conversation on this item? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
I would make a motion that we approve Resolution Resolution 02-22-03, approving and authorizing grant of utility easement to Kansas Gas Service as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Was that Mr. Dale?
You might have got tired.
Hempel.
Mr. Hempel, got it. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We'll move on to item F, Resolution 02-2204, award of bid and approval of contract with Slide Right, Inc. for the 2022 Waterpark slides. Mr. Porter.
Thank you, Mayor. Lindsay's pulling up the slide presentation. We have a couple short slides to share with you tonight, but I'll also reference some information that was included in the agenda packet as well. As you'll probably recall, at our last city council meeting, we prepared some information and discussed it in detail with the city council about issuing the RFP, and we're happy to report the results to you tonight. We also have Kent Heskett here in attendance if you have any specific questions that he can help us with as well. 1 second, yeah, that's great. So our first item of business is to look over that RFP process, remind us of the scope of work that was included in the bid request, look at our bid outcomes and the financial considerations, which are detailed in the agenda statement prepared for the council packet, and finally to consider a draft resolution which would approve a contract with Slide Right Incorporated, which we'll talk about more on the next couple slides. So our advertisement process was an aggressive schedule. Following the council meeting on January 18th, we released the 6-page RFP on the 19th of January, had questions due 2 weeks ago, and had no questions to include and resubmit to all bidders or interested parties. We then took bids until last Thursday and completed an assessment of the 2 bids that we received, as well as studied the financial impact of those 2. As you can see highlighted in the slide, tonight we have a recommended award and a potential selection and award of contract for the council to consider. A quick reminder too, the time period, should we approve this tonight, starts tomorrow, and the project is due to be completed by May 1st. So that is an aggressive timeline, and I'll talk a little bit more on an upcoming slide about some feedback we took from the city council to ensure that the vendor would demonstrate the capacity and the commitment to do that work that quickly. Next slide, please. Quick recap of our scope of work. The base bid was included, at a minimum, the 2 elevated water slides and the slide support structure. These obviously are the biggest components of the project. They have the most mass and the most area to resurface and to recoat, and thus have the higher cost. We included as an add alternate, which means the city can elect to pursue just the base bid or the base bid plus the add alternate work. And that add alternate was the mushroom structure, various shade supports, and other elevated water features like the little buckets that drip water and some other items that rise out of the water in shallow areas. Next slide, please. Our evaluation process is key, and that includes reviewing each response for completeness, rating the responses according to the criteria listed in the RFP for evaluation, and then determining a recommendation to share with you. Our 6 criteria are listed, and I won't read all of them, but I will point out specific feedback we did receive from the council was to add an additional level of confirmation that the vendor understood the schedule and wouldn't try to justify a continuance of work longer than May 1st. Also to include that they would commit to work with their suppliers to have those materials and commodities needed ordered promptly, so we weren't getting excuses from a vendor that they couldn't finish due to unavailability of supplies. And we did have some follow-up that I'll highlight in that regard. Next slide, please. So to highlight one additional thing before I stand for any questions, our 2 bids we received, and I apologize they're not on this slide, were from 2 firms, Slide Right Incorporated from Henderson, Colorado, and Slide Pros, which is a company in Missouri. Those 2 scores for the 2 respective bidders are again in the agenda statement. 86 out of 100 for Slide Right at the highest score, and Slide Pros came in at 76 out of 100. The difference in cost for the base bid was more significant, The Slide Ride Incorporated base bid was $67,000. Slide Pros was $74,241. Add alternate 1 for Slide Right was $7,500, which took their total to $74,500. And Slide Pros, the higher bid was only $4,200 for the add alternate, which took that cost to $78,441. Based on those two evaluation points, the evaluation matrix scoring by the criteria and the cost, staff do recommend that we move forward with Slide Right Incorporated as the low bid and the highest rated bid. Page 2 of the agenda statement, though, includes a financial analysis that I want to highlight. And Lindsay, could you switch to the PDF of the packet so we can point that out? Yeah. And it's on page 149. Thank you. If you scroll down just to slide them out. So the highlighted analysis here for consideration includes 2 scenarios. And our budgeted amount anticipated in the capital projects fund for this project was an item of discussion at our last meeting where we talked about this project. The city budgeted $50,000 as infrastructure sales tax proceeds to help fund this project's completion in 2022. We anticipated costs closer to $100,000, $110,000, $120,000. And so we were happily surprised when this project came in at $74,500. Because of that lower outcoming or bid that we received, we do request the approval to move forward with the whole project, base bid and add alternate, in the amount of $74,500. While that does exceed our projection for this project, this analysis shown in the agenda statement includes 2 scenarios. The first would be completing the project, completing other budgeted projects anticipated in the capital projects fund, and as you can see highlighted, the city would have approximately $997,000 in fund balance remaining in the capital projects fund. If the project were to not be completed because of it coming in slightly over budget estimates, that fund balance would instead be slightly over $1 million at $1.072 million. We don't anticipate, unless other projects in the capital projects fund, such as Church Street Bridge construction, come in over estimates, that we would need to do a budget amendment. But as you can see from this projection, funds available are not at question. So that's intended to help answer any questions you might have about spending slightly more than we estimated for this project cost. We're happy to take any questions, and I don't know if you have any other comments, George. Okay. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions, council?
Is the completion date in the contract documents?
It is set as May 1st as the deadline.
Okay.
Mr. Donnelly?
It looks like a good project, and we need to get it done. I just, it's more of a curiosity. Is it because of the size where we actually have a resolution, and that may be a city attorney? Instead of just approving the expenditure?
We've taken that practice with our recent construction type contracts for work like this, such as the Waterpark underwater resurfacing in the past. And so that's been our preference, and we've used a contract template that Anna's helped us review and prepare.
So is there a size limitation on that? This is more so for my education. So,
We don't have a hard and fast threshold that we have to adhere to.
do we have one just in general? So if Kent has something for $7,000, are we gonna do that every time, or do we set policy limit or some type of thing?
We haven't developed that as a concrete policy. I think we've sort of used a approach of if the complexity of the work necessitates things like insurance provisions and more than just a quote to be accepted, we've asked that it be more well-rounded into a contract format.
All right, thank you.
Any further conversation, council? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution 02-22-04, award of the bid and approval of the contract with Slide Right Inc. for 2022 Waterpark slides and elevated resurfacing project base bid and alternate number 1 for an amount not to exceed $74,500.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimously. Moving on to item G, consider approval of request to donate Tonganoxie Waterpark Family Season Pass to Jennison Christian Preschool. Mr. Porter?
Thank you, Mayor. The council may remember this item from previous years, except for 2020 when the water park was closed. At least the last 4 or 5 years, the city council has had this request come in from Genesis Christian School here in the community. They've requested each year for a single resident family season pass to be available at their auction, the Night of Nights event, that they included some information in their request to us about. That auction will take place in April, I believe on April 8th this year, and they do value the support of the city in offering this as an item to be auctioned off, and they report that they do have good interest in it each year. Denise Bixby submitted this request to staff, and if you have any additional questions, we'd be happy to take those back, but they'd appreciate a advance notice as much as possible as to whether the council would approve this request. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. This one's usually a gimme. Anybody have any questions? All in favor, or I'm sorry, I would accept a motion at this point then.
I'd make a motion to waive the $140 Tonganoxie Water Park residential family season pass fee and donate it to the Genesis Christian Academy for use in their upcoming silent auction.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Hempel, and thank you, Mr. Donnelly. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to item H, consider approval of quote from GBA to complete detention basin and a stormwater management study update. Mr. Brakovich?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. This item, well, and before I start, Harlan Russell with GBA had intended to be here this evening, but he is under a COVID protocol, and so he's following the meeting on our YouTube channel. And if you have any questions for him, we can quickly get him available by phone. You probably recall in 2017, we used some of our economic development grant from the county to do mass grading at the business park. So back in 2009, the city purchased about 240 acres total of property. 140 of that was what we've developed into 6 different lots at the business park. The mass grading included grading each one of those lots to a 2% grade and then creating this regional detention basin easement intended to accept the stormwater runoff from the projected development of each one of those lots. So, but we didn't do an as-built survey or topo survey of the detention basin when it was completed. We were still trying to save a little bit of money, but we did, in a similar fashion to the detention basin, what we did with the other lots, which were finding certain GPS coordinates and entering those in terms of elevation. What brought this to light, though, was as the Hills project came in and they were doing certain cross-sections in their own stormwater calculations, we found some deviation in what they were finding on their survey versus what our construction documents said. And that can be accountable for a number of reasons. Over 4+ years, there could be some silting occurring into the detention basin. There's a lot of vegetation that's growing in there. But it brought to light that we should probably have a more accurate read, especially as we've got Unilock there, Hills is under construction, and we're actively marketing the other lots as well. So what we propose to do with GBA here is really there's 2 things. Doing that as-built topo survey and then redoing the stormwater calculations. And I'll talk about why we want to do that. If you choose to approve this tonight, one other thing we're going to do, we've been talking about it for a couple of years with our fire department as a training exercise, is to go through and do a controlled burn in the wetlands. It is allowed, and especially if we're going to do a topo survey, we'd like to clear as much of that vegetation out as we can to get as accurate of a reading as we can. And I think in your packet, in the GBA documents, that topo survey cost is listed out at $6,500. The stormwater study, why we want to redo that is the original stormwater study was done on the pre-development plan and how many total square feet of finished or impervious surface there was going to be on each lot. And so what we're seeing between what Unilock has already built and even what they're projecting their manufacturing plant to be, even Hills, as large of a facility as it is on Lot 5, and some other development prospects we're seeing substantially less finished square footage space or less impervious surface space than what our own pre-development plan predicted or proposed could happen. So if the topo survey comes back and says, hey, yeah, there was some silting and now the volume you can account for in the detention basin is slightly less, knowing what finished products we have, we might be able to live with a lower volume because there's just not as much finished surface material as we predicted. And so rather than just simply going into a construction phase and saying, hey, the detention basin has changed over the last 4 years, let's go repair it and get it back to what the original construction document said, we'd like to follow up the survey with an actual stormwater study that says, here's what the volume you can account for. And, you know, we're not betting people, but I would predict that we may not need to do any additional work. But this is an important fact to have as we continue to market the property, because having a regional detention basin, which reduces this level of stormwater mitigation that each individual project has to do, is an important selling feature of the business park. So the stormwater study additional cost is in the GBA is projected at $5,000. They have some incidental costs at $250, and that's where we get to the total of $11,750 in the proposal. We did ask the city engineers at BG to review the proposal, and they felt the work was, the scope of work presented was thorough and would accomplish what we needed it to do, and they thought it was provided at a very competitive price. So I'd be happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Barkovich. Any questions, council, or conversation?
Yeah, over the long haul, is that our ownership forever in that detention? If say we fill the park completely up and 25, whenever it does, we're destined to own that forever?
That's a good question, and we don't have a final determination on that. I think as we start to fill up the park, we've had preliminary discussions about, in essence, creating like a district that the users or the tenants of the business park would be board members of, and they would end up being responsible for that. The wetlands is kind of an interesting thing. You can do a controlled burn, but they don't really, by federal law, they don't really want you doing much anything else in there. So it's not like you have to mow it or maintain it to any level. I think it would be very wise of us, Mr. Donnelly, as we complete or fill each of those 6 lots with tenants, that we try to move towards establishing at least a board or something that we can pass that burden on to.
Well, I would concur with that. I probably would suggest sooner than later. If you get too many in there that just say it's your problem,
Okay.
we may own it, even when Ken grows some hair back.
You first.
I'd have to chase it.
Okay, any further conversation? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the proposal submitted by GBA for civil engineering / land surveying work at the Tonganoxie Business Park in an amount not to exceed $11,750.
Thank you, Mr. Hempel. Is there a second?
Second.
I heard Mr. Dale. Thank you, Mr. Dale. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Moving to item A. I consider approval of quotes to complete water plant filter media replacement project.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll lead the introduction on this item, and again, we have Mr. Heskett here available. and probably eager to answer any technical questions you have about this item. In a nutshell, we have a short presentation to go over this item and talk about the scope of work and our quote collection for procurement, and then later we'll end with the recommended motion to approve several costs all in one combined motion if allowed. Next slide, please. A quick overview and summary for those that may not be familiar with this piece of equipment. The city operates at its water treatment plant facility equipment that's necessary to take well water and ready it for distribution into our mixed source distribution system across the community. Our two redundant filters are held within tanks similar to the image in the slide shown, the big blue colored tank. There's two of those in our water treatment plant, and these use a mix of anthracite and sand material. We call it filter media in that filter to strain and clean the water of certain minerals, I guess, and impurities before it's readied for distribution. Our filter media has a lifespan. It's typically estimated between 15 to 20 years, and the last replacement of our filter media was done in 1998. So we've reached the end and probably a couple years past the end of the normal lifespan of that material. Next slide, please. Oh, no, please move on. Thank you. The scope of work that we have bids collected for tonight really revolves around three steps. The first is to remove the existing filter media. The second is to wash and sanitize the interior of the tanks that hold the filter media. And the third is to install the new filter media inside tanks. We believe that one contractor can be asked to do all three of those steps. But in addition to that, as you'll see in the upcoming slides, we do have two commodities purchases to also complete in order to complete this project. One is to purchase new filter media, and the second is to purchase a new filter. It's a blower motor, and it, I believe, acts to sort of, help me out, Ken, I'm sorry.
It just blows into the filter when you're backwash, all the impurities out.
It allows, when the city backwashes those filters, it blows into them from the outside of the tank and flushes out the impurities. And we do need to complete that purchase as well to finish this project. Next slide, please. So this slide demonstrates what's included also in our agenda statements. The three bids we collected for the work of removing, cleaning, and replacing the filter media inside those tanks. You can see there's a pretty wide range of responses. The low bid from Environmental Works Incorporated was $17,593, substantially lower than our next lowest bid of $28,142. Our commodities purchases are proposed as a sole source due to the somewhat proprietary nature of those products. JL Components LLC would do the blower motor for $5,122, and the I have those two headings switched around, I'm sorry, and the filter media would be completed by Northern Filter Media Incorporated for a cost of $17,296. I'd like to highlight that total project cost is $40,011, which is 11 whole dollars higher than Kent's estimate when we developed the 2022 budget. So we all joked that we might have to chip in a dollar each to get over that slight overage in quotes, but we're very pleased with his work at helping us accurately predict this cost as an entire project. The funding source for these improvements is the Water Capital Fund. And again, this is a 20-year asset, so it'll rejoin our CMIP well down the road as a many years out in the future type of expense. So we don't anticipate that any of us may see this come back before us again. Next slide, please. If you have any questions, Kent or I or George would all be happy to help you. But again, we do ask for a combined motion to help in the interest of time and according to the materials presented tonight. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Mr. Heskett, did you have anything to add? I'm sorry I didn't ask you about the pool earlier.
No, Dan did a good job explaining everything. And
Okay.
Josh, the treatment plant operator, did a good job putting all this together.
All right, thank you, sir. Council, any conversation?
Kent, do we have to do anything with the stuff that comes out? Is that any environmental issue, or can you just?
No, we can dispose of it down at our
Dispose of it
site
without-
somewhere.
Okay. Kinda like cleaning a swimming pool, isn't it?
All right, any more conversation? If not, I would accept a motion.
Mayor, I'd like to make motion to approve and authorize moving forward with a quote from Water Filter Media Removal and Replacement Services with Environmental Works, Inc. for a cost not to exceed $17,593, and a quote for purchase of water filters, anthracite, that's close enough for me, media, from North Filter Media, Inc. for a cost not to exceed $17,296, and a quote for the purchase of a 2-inch pressure blower package from JL Components for a cost not to exceed $5,122.
Well done, Mr. Hempel. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. All right, this moves us on to item J, which we are going to move to the next meeting, correct, Mr. Porter?
Yes, thank you.
Item K, the city manager agenda.
I don't have any additional items, Time Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Brockovich. City attorney agenda. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem agenda. Mr. Hempel?
Yes, I have one, and I'm going to refer back to the city manager. Can you tell the council about the meeting Wednesday, up at the county commission meeting?
Sure, I believe Mr. Hempel's referring to a work session that the Board of County Commissioners are going to hold. Received an invitation from the county engineer, Bill Knoll, as well as County Administrator Mark Lawfrey, to discuss a program that was announced, really got some details on it last week through the Kansas Department of Commerce, called BASE Grants. It's essentially the state allocated some of their ARPA funds towards eligible projects. The gist of the program is if you have development projects that are either underway or being planned or even in speculative in nature, you would submit an application for a grant to have the state help pay for that out of those funds. The maximum award amount would be $25 million. They've allocated about $100 million of their ARPA funds. There is a 25% local match requirement. What we've been talking with the county staff about is the need for the county to improve both Kansas Avenue and 222nd Street near the business park. And what we've been asked to, I think the invitation, well, I know the invitation went out to all 4 of the city managers or city administrators here in the county. And I plan to go and talk about the need for those improvements based not only on the activity within the park now, the current marketing, plus the balance of that 240 acres that we originally bought, that we still have 80-plus acres developed on the east side of that, which would be accessed by Kansas Avenue, which is restrictive now because it's a gravel road. And so I plan to make those comments and ask them to prioritize this because, you know, we're approaching $400 million of total capital investment in the business park, and I think that certainly would warrant those road improvement projects in that area.
Thank you, city manager.
Anything more, Mr. Hempel?
That's all I have.
All right, thank you, sir. Excuse me. City council agenda. Anyone have anything?
I just wanted to make mention the annual appreciation dinner for TDA. They reached out and asked, cordially invited all of us to that dinner. Because it'll be a large one considering it's 2020/2021 awards for businesses.
Cool.
They just asked that we all be there.
Awesome, thank you very much. Anyone else?
I just have some documents that I wanted to pass out tonight, just to follow up on my insanity of last meeting about discussing temporary notes, but without Laura Lee here, I'll hold that until she gets here. I think she deserves the right to listen, or maybe have to be painfully slayed.
If it's,
while I do it.
Yeah, okay, great. If it's what Mr. Brockovich showed me this morning, it was very interesting. Was that the same piece of paper?
Stress tests, so,
Yeah, it's exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, 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 I think that'd be great. Okay, mayor agenda. Number one is consider appointment procedure for 2 positions on the Tonganoxie Planning Commission with expiring terms. It's my understanding these are reappointments.
Yes.
Just go ahead.
Correct. So we have 2 positions whose terms are expiring, both incumbents, but they don't expire until May. Thanks, Dan. And Lindsay had sent out an email request to the 2 individuals to see if they were interested in being reappointed, and both affirmed that they were. In fact, I believe John Kirk is here tonight. During last week's planning commission, it came up, and Ms. Gee, I think I saw her here earlier too, reiterated that those 2 positions are up, and they affirmed again during the planning commission meeting that they would be interested. That is the mayor's appointment. So in the past, especially if we didn't have an incumbent interested in reappointment, we did some advertisement to say the positions become available. Since both incumbents are interested in reappointment here, Mayor, it's certainly acceptable if you wanted to choose that route and just allow them to be reappointed.
Help me remember, is Mr. Kirk and who's the other person?
Patty Bittler.
Patty Bittler, okay. It would be my desire to reappoint those 2 individuals to planning and zoning. So that's what I'm putting on the table, and we need to have a motion and a second and a vote on that, or just a consensus vote?
A consensus vote,
Okay.
Mayor.
I would like to appoint those 2 to planning and zoning. All in,
I would make a motion that we accept the mayor's proposed candidates for the position.
okay, thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Is there a second? Thank you, Ms. McCutcheon. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you.
Thanks for serving.
Mr. Brockovich, if there is a procedure question that we do need to further address, let's maybe discuss that at another meeting. Is that okay?
For appointments in general?
Yeah.
Sure, we can do that.
Yeah, great. Now we hit on my agenda, I have 2 executive sessions, and Mr. Hempel has the first one. We'll do them separately.
Mayor, I move that city council recess into executive session to discuss petition filed against the city pursuant to the attorney-client consultation exception in KSA 75-4319B2. The executive session will include city manager, special counsel, city manager, and assistant city manager. The meeting will resume. How much time? Okay, 10 after 8. I think 10 after 8.
Sounds good. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? We are in executive session. Excuse us. Jake, did we give one?
Huh?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Second the motion.
Okay, thank you.
Please.
I was shocked. I'm just shocked.
You heard from them? Borrow?
Okay, city council is now back in regular session.
They didn't call me. That's-
Let the record show that no binding action was taken in the executive session. Mr. Hempel, do we have a second executive session, correct?
I think Mr. Donnelly has it.
All right, thank you.
I move that the city council recess into executive session to discuss the city manager's annual review process pursuant to personnel matters of non-elected personnel exception KSA 75-4319B1. The open meeting will resume in city council chambers at
15 minutes.
25 after, 20 after, 25?
Let's do 20.
Let's make it 8:30.
Eight.
What'd you say?
8:30?
Yeah.
Resume at 8:30 PM. Executive session will include city attorney, city manager, assistant city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. I heard that one. All in favor, say aye.
Yeah.
Aye.
All right, we're in executive session. Okay, we're back in regular session. Let the record show that no decisions were made, no actions were taken during that time. I have nothing more on the mayor's agenda. Mr. Dale,
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn this meeting.
we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Ms. McCutcheon. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? See you in a couple of weeks. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, everybody.